Sairam, so questions or things that you would like me to talk about? Sairam.
So you've sort of witnessed the culture and the behavior of the Canadian side youth for the past few days.
Yes.
Being the zonal chairperson
Yes.
for all of Zone 1,
Yes.
do you see a difference or similarities across the youth, across the entire zone?
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, yes. The question was, having spent the weekend with the Canadian youth, do I see a difference between them and other youth that I see in the other parts of the zone? I think that this conference was extremely well prepared. I think that the loving action of everyone, the feeling of family, I think is quite striking. Some of those of you who went to the Zone Youth Conference in Pennsylvania will remember what that was like. And I think that my answer right away was to just say no. We're all the same. But I think that there are some slight differences, and I think that you're doing very, very well. Very well indeed. So I would say mostly keep doing more of what you're doing. So I don't know if that answers your question so much or not. Other thoughts or other pieces that anyone would like to talk about? It could be about, yes, sir.
Maybe just you could speak about your most memorable experience with Swami.
Okay, most memorable experience with Swami. Yes, they asked me that in Guyana, and I was a little embarrassed to tell this, but I think I might as well tell this story anyway. That because it sort of reflects a little bit of indiscipline. But with Swami, sometimes there's a rule for everything and an exception for everything, you know, when you're at that cosmic level. But anyway, Swami was doing this remarriage behind the college in Whitefield. And so there's a couple, and he's performing the marriage, and a bunch of us were allowed to be right behind Swami, you know, while he's doing the marriage. And it was my good fortune to be exactly right behind Swami. And so here's Swami's head, and here's my head. so close, you know, that basically Swami's doing everything, and I can't really see what he's doing because I'm right behind him. And so this is all going on, so finally I'm getting closer and closer, and my face is getting closer and closer to Swami's hair. And I'm sort of attracted by the divine Krishna. And finally I see towards the end of the ceremony, my face is sort of going from side to side, sort of brushing through Swami's hair. And he was kind enough to not say anything. And as I say, you know, these are professionals, don't try this at home. But that one strikes me. When I try and finish my meditation in the morning, I try and think of what I would think of as celestial moments, and that is quite near the top. Other thoughts or anything that people would like to talk about? See.
How can we motivate sort of further or coming generations to keep the same momentum?
Yes, this is a good one. So the question is how to motivate coming generations. So particularly when Swami passed away, and I think some people have alluded to this, perhaps at this conference also, there's a feeling like, I'm staying with Swami, but what about everyone else? They'll all melt away, they'll all disappear. What will happen to Swami's institutions? What will happen to everything around Swami? And what will happen to the future of Swami? And I think it scared all of us. Well, it turns out that so many millions of us had such deep personal experience and contact with Swami and felt the greatness of Swami and the importance of Swami in our lives, that it seems now like people are coming out of the woodwork, and that what used to be what I was calling, you know, Swami's at the hub, and there were a million spokes, and we each had sort of a personal, some kind of personal, even if it was just a small feeling, there was some direct thing between Swami and us. And now that the hub is not in form, we're having a chance to see each other as Swami. We're trying to work with that. And we're here together, we're thinking about Swami. That is Swami. You know, if we think hard enough, he may concretize, you know, you may see him standing, whatever. But even if we don't, even if we just think enough about Swami, that is Swami. That is the celestial thought. That is the divine thought. That's what, and when we, even better, when we become that immersed in that thought throughout our life, everything is Swami. That's better than competing for darshan. You know, with darshan, will I get to the front? You know, will I get whatever it is I'm trying to get from Swami? Was, you know, am I going to be the lucky one to get the following thing? Can I give this letter to Swami? It's all about I, me, 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 me. It's divine, but it's still there's still quite a bit of ego left. But if we come to a time where it's all is Swami, you say Swami's name and my heart opens. Even if we, you know, and then we get even stronger, we're able to be out in the world and we see someone, we think of Swami. That can be difficult. We have to keep careful on our boundaries till we get to that point. But I think that's the key item. As far as the organization goes and Swami's programs go, I'm quite thrilled actually at seeing as I visit countries, you know, in what we would used to think out in the middle of nowhere, where, you know, thousands of people know about Swami and are interested in Swami and will do whatever they can for Swami. That's, I think, quite thrilling, and I think that you will all share in that thrill, that ongoing beauty of that. I'm quite convinced of it. Okay. Others, please. Yes.
I have a question about self-discipline. So someone says discipline and stuff. So a lot of these actions go towards a lot of what the youth want to do. We briefly talked about like how do we discipline ourselves to be Swami, or to have Swami in our lives, in our external lives?
Okay, important question. What is the nature of self-discipline? How do we discipline ourselves to be true devotees? What's the nature of disciplining ourselves? In modern psychology, they've taken up this issue, what they call self-regulation. When we're really young, when we're infants, you know, there's no self-regulation. I feel wet, I'm going to cry. I'm hungry, I'm, you know, going to squawk. As we get older, we regulate ourselves. You know, in other words, ideally in the world, we come to a place where I'm about to say a word. Is this word useful? Is this word truthful? Is this word necessary? What is the use of this word? I'm going to have an interaction with someone. How can I make it the most divine? How can I make it worthwhile for this person and for me? Doesn't mean that you have to give some great teaching. It can be a momentary, even just a hello. Hello is a moment. You know, you can see one of the wonderful things about the professor. He says hello, you know that you've been said hello to. So it's one of the things I'm trying to take away from the conference, which is, you know, someone was saying, oh, you know, be a light to everyone. And you know how Swami often says, be alike to everyone? One time he said that to me. And in my little ego, I thought, he said, be a light to everyone. You know, like I was going to be some special light. And then I realized later he said, be alike to everyone. And I realized there was something that I needed to do. You know, there was some lack, that I wasn't the same to everyone. And so that's getting a little bit off the topic, but self-discipline. Swami wants us to regulate ourselves. He wants us to use your hand for the divine. How many of you saw the thought for the day, August 12th? It was about the sacredness of hands. It was quite beautiful. Actually, another fellow devotee of mine had a dream about Swami came and showed that the hands were covered because out of respect for the divinity of the hands. So the hands are very, very important. What we say, what we do, and we regulate it. The best way of regulating ourselves is thinking, would Swami approve of this? You know, in other words, it's basically saying, what does our conscience approve? That's a useful way of disciplining ourselves. If we know that there's some lack in ourselves, if there's some way that we're leaning over too far this way, or there's some way that we're not fulfilling something, or there's something that doesn't agree with us, we don't feel quite right about it. Those are things that we want to make up a little plan. how am I going to try and balance this out? How am I going to try and deal with this? In psychology, they call this the difference between syntonic and dystonic. Syntonic means there's this aspect of myself, maybe some other people don't like it, but I kind of like it. I'm proud of that. This is me. But dystonic means I do this thing, you know, but gee, I wish I didn't, or it seems a little weird, or maybe it's not the optimal way to be. That's dystonic. Useful, circle that, notice that, write that down. Figure out what it is that would be worthwhile to change. And make up a little plan. It doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to, you know, conquer these habits or change this aspect of your personality instantaneously, but you know you have to do a little something extra to try and, what we call compensation in psychology. You have to sort of try and balance it out a little bit. Does that answer? Does that? Okay, good, good. Please.
There's a couple of questions that came from the youth.
Okay.
So it's a two-part question. So I'll read both parts. You can address them. One is, how does Swami feel, and what does he say about Sai devotees that are non-vegetarian? And the second part of that question is, how do you find a balance between following Swami's teachings and living in a Western society? Example, drinking alcohol occasionally.
Okay, two separate questions here. So, remind me of the first question again?
What does Swami, how does Swami feel?
Oh, about the non-veg. Okay.
About non-veg question.
Yeah, so Swami deals with millions and billions of people, let's say. And we've seen him interact on many people. And it depends on where they're coming from. So on one level, Swami gives a general teaching. Be vegetarian. You know, don't harm animals. One time, how many of you know the diet doctor, Dr. Robert Atkins, the Atkins diet? Not so many, okay. Anyway, he used to be very big. But anyway, one time he came to see us, came with us to see Swami, you know, about 30 years ago. And he was complaining to me. He's a very famous doctor, very wealthy, because he did this diet. And this diet said that you can lose weight if you eat lots of protein and some fat and no carbohydrate. It works, but it's not good for your system, as it turns out. And what happens is, it means you're eating a lot. World, you've probably caused the death of more animals than anyone in this whole world. maybe Swami does hate you. That's obviously untrue. Obviously untrue. But so Swami has a, and as a matter of fact, Swami did later see him. Swami has a different relation to different people. There was one young Westerner that came in the early days, skeletally thin, and he was putting total emphasis on you know, this unbelievable strict diet of almost nothing, and it was beyond vegetarian, vegan, or anything. And you know, he was skeletally thin. So he finally got an interview with Swami, and Swami told him, "Eat chicken." So, of course, which, you know, he had dedicated his life to eating a certain way, and Swami just totally was off the charts from his point of view. So there were a couple of things. One, Swami's concerned about his health, so probably it made sense in that situation for him to have eaten some chicken. Second, it's one of Swami's jobs is to provoke our minds, to, you know, undercut all of our preconceptions, and that's probably another function of why he did it. I had another friend who was very sattvic and devoted to Swami, but he was married to a woman who was not. And she sort of ran the show. And so she was always, you know, there were a lot of social functions, and so he was always in this dilemma of what he was supposed to do. And so he had an interview with Swami, and Swami said to him, "You can eat some fish." He says, "But just a little, has a bad smell to it." So Swami reaches out, and he makes some accommodations for people, but there's no doubt that, generally speaking, we want to eat vegetarian. You know, at this stage in our development, unless there's some special reason for not, we should go that way. It's first just out of respect for the animals. You know, why would we want all the death of these various animals on our hands? So, second.
The second question was more about balancing the Swami's teaching
Yes.
with that of living in the Western world?
Yes, yes. Okay, the $64,000 question. How do you do this? As we were just speaking inside, I was saying this depends on what level of intensity you are ready for. And so Swami would speak individually to people, and he might set the pace in someone's life. But for most of us, we don't have that kind of option to talk with Swami, and so we need to figure out what parts of Swami's teachings can we put into practice. You know, there are, as you said, what, 50 or 100 volumes of Swami's teachings. You would have a hard time fully digesting, even intellectually, all of the teachings in your lifetime. So what is it you're going to take? Swami said you take some small part of it so that it's a distinct but doable change. You want to figure out this thing that he said, this is for me, I need to do this, or this has some resonance for me, I should do this. So on this level, some people are able to, this what I call the steep path, just have no friends, you don't mix with the outer culture, you say hello to your fellow co-workers, you spend your life in sadhana. So in one of Swami's speeches, he said to someone, Swami, when he would give a speech, he would do it, you know, the old Indian style for medical things would be what would be called a mixture. They would sort of, you know, mix up all these various liquids and they give them to you for somehow your health. So Swami said his speeches are like a mixture. So he would look around at the crowd and he would respond. He might answer your question, and then he might provoke you over here. He might encourage you over here. And it's all on a mental level. I had that experience one time. I was sitting about where this gentleman is at the end of the table, and Swami's giving a speech, and it's in Telugu. And I'm just enjoying, you know, I've got my kurta and I've got a japamala underneath. It's not showing at all. And I'm just chanting my mantra, just gazing at Swami, enjoying. And Swami's giving a speech and he's reacting to everyone. And suddenly he looks at me, and in Telugu he sort of fires off a couple of lines. And, you know, kind of surprised, and he goes on, he's doing the same all over the place. So I had to ask the fellow next to me what he said. He said, you can do japa all your life, but unless you inquire who you are, it will come to nothing. So Swami picks out, and he's saying things, sometimes boom. Let's see, why did I get off on that? I'm saying, oh, okay, it depends on what Swami might be telling you. Some people he'd say, oh, I know, I wanted to mention about the teaching Swami said in one of his speeches. He said, how do you handle your day? What should your day be like? He'd say, you have 24 hours. 6 hours of the day should be for your personal interest, your work for your personal interest. 6 hours of the day should be working for others, seva and whatever. 6 hours of the day should be for sleep. 6 hours of the day should be for sadhana. How many of you are doing that? That's pretty steep going. But I think it's useful to know that, just as here's what the ideal would probably look like. So we have to figure what level of steepness we can work with next. So for some people, saying cutting off the outside world isn't either what they're ready for. So then, next level down, you might look at it, you pick out some people of good character. And you say, okay, this person has qualities, is not a Sai devotee, but there are qualities within him. I will, you know, spend more time with him, or I'll gravitate towards him if some social thing comes up, or those people will come up. Then a lesser level is you mix with a lot more people, but you try and keep some boundary. The Swami said, you know, when you're young in the devotee world, you're like a little plant that the cattle can destroy. And the Western culture is certainly that powerful. It can stomp you out. You need some kind of barrier, some kind of around you. So another level is when that tree grows up, it gives big shade for all the people around it. It can't be stomped out by the cattle anymore. But before that, it needs to be protected carefully. So this Western culture, as you know, is a giant vat of power and confusion. And the values that are presented are sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes fantasy, sometimes out of this world, sometimes ridiculous. Don't get too engrossed. Don't get too engrossed. For one thing, the culture will change anyway. Let's say you you adapt yourself fully to whatever the 2014 version is. In 2032, it's going to look a lot different. So there's no need to try and bend yourself too much to local culture. Enough so that you're not hurting anyone, you're helping other people, you're working on your sadhana, you're doing your duties, but otherwise, God love them. Happy. Yes.
Because we're broken out into male and female, I want to
Yes.
ask whether there's a distinguished level of expectation as male side of the organization.
That's an interesting question. So is there a greater expectation, or is there a different expectation for males as opposed to females in the Psi organization? Traditionally, as they set it up in Puttaparthi, you saw there seemed to be in the positions there were more males, and that Swami was more focused over on the male side of the students and things like that. But I think in terms of us, that's not really so much an issue. Why and how Swami was doing that, that's, we can't sort of suss out Swami's internal motivations or whatever. That's beyond our pay grade. But we can know that for the Psi organization now, both women and men should have very similar opportunities. I don't know, there are probably some exceptions to that, but I can't think of them right at the moment. And perhaps another way of thinking about it is, Swami was talking about gender. He said, in reality, there's only one gent. All the rest are ladies. So and what that means is that in the procreative force, in the yang force, the force that creates, the force that drives this world, there's one force, in that case the Swami, circling around, the dance of the 16,000 gopikas. There's one Krishna. Then there are all 16,000, I guess in those days meant pretty much close to infinite, are all the ladies dancing around. In a sense, we're in the same position. We're circling, we're looking to, we're trying to be part of the advent of this Psi. And we're just in the dance. As Swami said, only he knows how difficult is teaching this dance to all of these people. We are those people. So I'm not sure if that fully answers the gender. Obviously is one of the great mysteries of the universe, but again, we do what we can. Saram. Yes.
Regarding the non-vegetarian.
Yes.
And connection to Narayan Seva, feeding the poor.
Yes.
In Western culture, is it okay to serve non-vegetarian and
Generally, we say no, that it's not good to serve non-vegetarian food. I think it's possible to make exceptions if, like you were in some place and there was a disaster and that was the only food available or something like that. Or if it's just good-hearted people serving with the best of their ability to the people and, you want to help them out in some way, yes. But generally speaking, under the Psi banner, no, because it's a little too strong and clear a teaching of Swami's that, we don't want to be part of the slaughter of animals.
Western culture, some people they want to
Yes. I've heard sometimes, in the various Narayan feedings, sometimes you'll get complaints from the people, like, where's my whatever, and it's Sairam. Yeah.
Aren't we like suppose let's say where we were giving vegetarian sandwiches and,
Yes.
and they don't like it, they don't eat it, but we're not fulfilling the need, right?
Well, if it's totally rejected like that, I think it's time to move on somewhere else, because there's a whole world of pain out there that's waiting for our service. So it's if the people can pick and choose, maybe we're not the right people for that. There's some other project waiting us that's more. That's my thought. Yes. How are we doing? Yes.
How have you used Swami's teaching in your professional life?
Yes, I find it personally very, very interesting. My professional life, I spent 12 years on Wall Street, and at that time, this was the late 70s, and it was rare enough that I was like thinking of myself as Swami's man on Wall Street. And so I was sort of very, very proud of that. And in that Dharmic challenge, I sort of write that we had in our firm, they were trying to get sort of a little bit of a buddy system as backup if someone was away. And so one of the jokesters in the firm, whatever, very like that. So that sort of happened, but much more so in my role as a psychologist. So I also was running a hospital department, and I was also teaching psychology. And when I was in college, psychology was running a lot of rat lab. You were running them through a maze, and it was a very sort of reductionist behavioral model, and I didn't like it, so I didn't major in psychology. But later, 20 years later, 30 years later, it's very much influenced by Eastern thought. So the fact that the benefits of meditation could be quantifiable by machines was a revolution. The think that brain waves and body waves and sympathetic functions of the nervous system could be controlled by the mind, by yogis. You know, they would hook them up. This happened in the late 60s. This was a revelation for the whole field. So the field is much, much more respectful of spiritual traditions and religious traditions. And now we sort of ask a lot, you know, looking at it as a resource for everyone. So in my work with individuals, you know, I'll be meeting with them, and only rarely do I ever mention about Satya Sai. But often when they come up to a particular problem, I'll think of a quote of Swami's, and I'll say it, and it makes me very happy. And sometimes you can see they get a little bit from it, and I feel like it's bringing Swami into the clinical room. So I try and do that, and before I meet with someone, I try and think of Swami and sort of clear out the junk, and so to be with them. Does that answer? Okay. Yes, please.
Question inspired from like personal experience.
Yes.
How do you like, I guess, from your own behalf, like how do you define our center kind of, because you know, like you have places of worship like a temple or a church or something, you define it, you know,
Yes.
it's concrete, right?
Yes.
But a lot to friends who are even like interested in the center, you kind of stumble a little bit and you say, well, it's kind of like a temple, and then you kind of succumb to one answer. But I think that has to do a lot with even attracting more people, because if they have a kind of an understanding, clear cut of what kind of, you know, what goes down, you know, it's a spiritual center, but
Yes.
you know exactly what happens. Like, how do you define that?
Very good question. So the question is, how would you define what a center is? So centers sprung up spontaneously. I believe they did. I don't know if they were in India well before they ever popped up in the U.S., but I know there were ones in the U.S. and perhaps in Canada before the organizations were formed. So the idea was originally, I think, from Swami, who said, you know, you have in your house, you have some little bhajan, and then later he would add something else and something else. You know, you have some little study circle, you do some seva. You know, he'd sort of say in offhand ways. But an offhand way from the avatar sets all kinds of things in motion. And so since then, you know, there are thousands, literally thousands of centers around the world, and hundreds of national organizations, or more than 100 national organizations around the world. So these are all set by Swami. And Swami doesn't always define it really narrowly, because centers come in all different flavors. So you have centers which are devoted to one type of thing, one type of language. Although we discourage rituals, some have a little bit more ritual than others. Some Swami would say, oh, you don't even have to have a picture of me. You know, it's, I don't know of any centers that went that far, but in other words, there's a great deal of latitude as to how the center can express itself. And I was just mentioning, I was very happy in New York when they had a situation where you had a Japanese language center, a Spanish-speaking center, you had other English-speaking centers, some that were sort of more Hindu-related, some that were more Christian-related, and you had a center in New York that was for every night of the week. So depending on what your interest was and your schedule, you could go to any of them, wherever you were. To me, that's ideal. I hope I live to see the day when that happens everywhere. So that the centers are there for people to express themselves, and if there is an affinity of a certain way of doing it, some, for instance, like to just sing mostly English songs. Some are very keen on service. That's great. So the center has to be, when we think of centers, it can be somewhat flexible. In the organizational terms, they now say a center is a group that's able to support the three wings. That means that they have an education component, they have a service component, and they have a devotional component, and some even a ladies component. So, and no doubt we'll add other components over the years, but these were ones that Swami introduced. The ladies component he introduced in India, not so much in the West, but who knows, there are a few centers that have even found that that's useful in contemporary culture. So those are sort of activities of centers. Now, where a center meets, some have built huge, like temple halls and things like that. I'm thinking of, Scarborough, and I'm thinking of Trinidad and things like that. U.S. not so much, because he told us not to, but he was telling us specifically, I think it was, he said, in effect, U.S., you can sort of sit in the back for a while, watch and see what these other people do. So, and then there's some places where it makes sense to have the center in the home, for financial reasons or the size of the center or whatever. Then there's some places where it doesn't make sense to have it in the home, if there's, perhaps less difference if you have it off in a center, another spot. Sometimes people will have a center in a church, and then you have to just make sure it's not saying, oh, we're like this church or we're like this temple. We're universal. So yeah, how people can see the center. Also, how do you welcome newcomers? This is like an issue that's been going on for years and years and years. Should we totally focus ourselves for the newcomer? Like, okay, we're going to give a little intro. We're going to, try and explain everything at every moment. We've come to a compromise where a lot of places you have certain times are for newcomers, or if it's a regular time, you have someone speak with them privately, either before and or after. But we haven't really sorted that one out. I don't think we've sort of come to a final thing, and the centers are still in formation, I would say. Does that answer?
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Anything else? How are we doing time-wise? Time's up? Okay. Sairam, thank you very much.